Does JJ know what he's getting into? But you certainly can't like be a player coach. It's too many variables to deal with.
What are your thoughts on JJ Redick becoming the new Lakers head coach?
It's not unprecedented that someone who hasn't had any head coaching experience takes over an NBA team. You don't have to look very far. Steve Kerr did it, and he was very successful very early. So that said, he did have a lot of experience, I think, as a GM. And then actually weirdly similar experience to JJ in the NBA as a player. So, I would willing to say, it's not a prerequisite. I mean, it probably seems like, having some version of like coaching experience would be a good thing as a head coach. But, it's hard to tell you that it's not going to work when it has worked somewhat recently in the modern game. So, I suppose that what's interesting about it is the method with which this whole thing played out. And that might be probably the most interesting part of it, because at the very least, with what we were able to see from JJ and LeBron on that podcast or on that YouTube channel, there's no questioning the fact that JJ has a really good command of the X's and O's. He seems to really understand that. So that's, that I'll definitely make sure to make that clear, that he seems to me to be someone who understands the game in that way.
Well, you think that there's validity to the whole podcast tampering like situation? You think that there's validity to that?
I mean, listen, did it enter JJ's mind when they started this thing? And, the only thing I thought was interesting, and I said this on my show, was that normally a show like this would have probably been planned right when the season ends. And then they have maybe like all summer to kind of plan it, design the set, the whole thing. And then they kind of figure it out, and then they launch it at a certain time. This comes up in the middle of the year. I think their first episode was in January at some point. So that was just kind of interesting to me that LeBron was going to take something like that on, in the middle of the year. And also with JJ, who's in the middle of having to cover, all these games and all that stuff, because Doc Rivers took the job in Milwaukee. So, that was interesting, but there's no question in my mind that it must have flashed into JJ's head. Darvin Ham is someone that's been maligned and has got a lot of intense pressure from the Laker fans and Laker community. And this will probably be a nice thing to kind of connect with LeBron and have that out there. So I have to imagine it was on his mind. Was it on anyone else's mind? I can't tell you, but I think we'd be foolish to say that JJ wasn't thinking about this when it started.
Okay. I do want to ask too, specifically about the Lakers situation. Do you think that there was any legs to like, I'm gonna let Damo up. You think that there was any legs to Dan Hurley being a potential coach in the game, or that was just smoke?
Very, very strange. I as soon as it came out, I was on a couple other shows telling him like, no, he's not taking that job. Like he was not going to leave. So I never felt like it was a serious thing. He did come out apparently to LA, but there was weird. I had heard another story again. Are we here for innuendo? Can we talk about rumors? Because I guess we can all do that, right? Yeah. There was some notion that he lost his leverage with the Kentucky thing in terms of signing an extension with UConn, and that was a mistake. He should have milked that a lot longer. He probably would have been able to get a better extension then. So they needed help. They needed some way to generate another version of leverage for him. Along comes the Lakers thing where he could really play it up, knowing he wasn't going to take it. He got the extension, I believe, right? I think UConn gave it to him out of this, I believe. I'm not crazy. So like that could very well be what it was part of. And, if you want to, throw Woj into this, someone who is very, very closely connected to the Hurley family, if they needed to create this notion of, looking at him all along, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me that they were really doing that either. So maybe they were all kind of using each other. Maybe the Lakers were using this as a way to show, we weren't really interested in JJ. We're doing our due diligence here. Didn't work out with Hurley. Well, okay, now we're going to hire JJ. I think maybe everyone was kind of helping each other out on this one and to get the results they all wanted.
Hi, Coach. How we doing today?
All right. What's happening?
Chilling.
Got the whole collective here. Okay. I guess it's funny because he came out and said, and mind you, why wouldn't he say, "Hey, this wasn't a ploy to get me some more money"? Why wouldn't he say that, right? But
yeah, I mean, can't really say that. I think if you're trying to negotiate with the team, with UConn, for instance, but the idea that they wouldn't give him an extension of whatever he wanted at this point is silly to me too, because the guy just won back-to-back championships. Yeah. He is undisputedly the best college basketball coach. Whether he's going to, his head's going to explode one day on the sideline or not, with the way he coaches is another issue. And he has professed that he had said he's evolved, because you have to remember the other context here is that his father was also, a winning coach, won more than hardly anybody has ever won before. But I've been to a practice of Bob Hurley, and it was kind of frightening the way he would treat players in the high school level. And we know that Danny was very similar in coaching that same way. And he said he's evolved and understood the detrimental effects that has. But if there's anything that I do on my show, I kind of go out and try and make sure that discussion is had about optimal ways to communicate to players. The Bobby Knight style, which was accepted for all those years, for decades and decades, is not the optimal way. And you might be able to get some results out of that. But I would like to think that because Danny evolved, like you said he has, and has not used anger or disgust the way his father did all those years, that might have gotten them to that next level where they now are winning as much as they are.
I would want to see, even if it's not with the Lakers, of course, because they already signed their coach. Because every clip, every video, every game, he does look like he's about to just blow his top. I do want to see how that works on a pro level,
right?
Specifically, and especially with like older guys. That was probably the most interesting thing about the whole Lakers thing, is because I would love to see him yell at LeBron. Not because LeBron, well, maybe LeBron doesn't be yelled at, but I would love to see LeBron's reaction, like 38-year-old LeBron looking at him like, are you serious right now?
Right. Well, I like to see Danny Hurley's reaction when he realizes that LeBron is behind him, signaling or saying something like over his shoulder to somebody while he's trying to coach him, which we've seen LeBron do as well. And that's why it's interesting how this is all going to work. Because does JJ know what he's getting into? Does LeBron maybe so completely accept JJ that he will back off a little bit or not? And it's not saying that LeBron shouldn't be involved in the coaching of a team. He has that IQ that few players do, but you certainly can't be a player coach. It's too many variables to deal with while you have to do the load that he has on the court, and then have to try and keep your eye on and manage other things, which I think there are times he tries to do. So it's going to be an interesting thing. I don't think that JJ is going to have the kind of success that Steve Kerr had as a newbie coach coming in and taking over a team. That's what's more interesting to me anyways, because with a team like this, it has LeBron and AD, who did play a lot of games last year together. I don't know if you can really say the injury thing is really what hurt them. They definitely did not perform that well, bottom line. And, I think their playoff results also mirrored what they did in the regular season. So what does it say about a team that does have LeBron and AD playing a whole bunch of games without the injury issue, unable to win a lot of games? That's probably the more startling thing to me as anything else.
Yeah. Let's move a little to the East Coast. They haven't decided or finalized what was going on. I think we might have talked about this last time you were on, but the Detroit Pistons let go of Monty Williams after a year and a boatload of money. Thoughts on that? Because honestly, although I understand there might have been some issues with Monty and his style and everything like that, a year is not enough time to me, in my personal opinion, especially if you have $100 billion tied up into a coach just like that.
It probably would be worth. I have to admit, I didn't watch a lot of Pistons games this year. So I don't know if anybody did.
I don't blame you, Coach. I don't blame you.
Because it might be worth a little bit of a dive, just kind of see, but I'm well familiar with Monty's coaching from before. Mm-hmm. And, certainly in stark contrast to what we're talking about, Hurley and then those guys, it's certainly his communication style is such, would be the kind of thing that fits in an NBA, arena, right? He's a guy who doesn't really get angry and yell at players. That said, the fact that the relationship between him and DeAndre Ayton apparently seemed to completely just devolve into nothing. They didn't talk to each other. He couldn't figure out a way to communicate, which is, when you have a starter on a team and your coach isn't able to figure out a way to talk to you, then that's a problem. I've never been overly impressed with his X's and O's to some degree. I feel like when we got to the playoffs and those Phoenix teams, I know I've done those videos and it was just this doesn't make sense what they're running. And if he's not controlling that, then that's not a good thing either. And if he is controlling it, then we have a problem, because these are not the kind of plays you'd be running to optimally get the good shots. That said, having KD, could be another thing which changes the trajectory of how much control you have. So, so I suspect that it had to be bad, right? Like, Detroit doesn't have any pressure to win right now. There's no pressure. They let him go late. It was weird, right? Like, it was not like usually like the next day after the season's over, we're going to make some changes. That was not what happened. So something might write a book. I don't know, but something was definitely very, very strange with how that went down. And you're right. Like, having it be only 1 year and then do that in the midst of a time where they really couldn't care whether they win or not. Is strange in a way that there's got to be something that they really didn't like about either the knowledge of the coaching or his communication style, right?
Well, I don't know if you saw, it came out that it wasn't a like president of basketball operations or GM decision. It was it was from the ownership, straight up from the ownership.
Yeah, right. Remind me, is that job still open?
The coaching job?
Yeah,
it is.
No one's been hired. And this is, because again, the only reason why that would make sense to me is if the owners, like, they got somebody else that they're close with, they want to bring in, right? Like, that seems to me like the kind of thing that would happen, because a lot of money to give up, but they have not replaced him with anybody. I know Kenny just got hired in Cleveland, right? So that is weird. You're right. It is very, very strange. There's not a lot of explanation for that, but it's certainly what makes more sense to me that it wouldn't have been any of the basketball people making this decision. That, at least that is consistent with what I would think in my mind how that would go. So I don't know. I really, there isn't much to answer, except for the fact that, like, at some point when you realize maybe this guy isn't going to get us eventually where we want to go, let's move now. But again, they would have fired somebody, would have brought somebody in, they would have had that person in mind already. So it's very confusing, and perhaps maybe indicative of like what's going on in Detroit overall and why they've struggled for a while.
Not to backtrack too much, but going back to the conversation, and if y'all talk about it, my apologies, but going back to JJ and Monty as well, from your perspective, how much of NBA coaching do you think is like ego management and knowing and commanding a locker room of men? Because that's always been my biggest concern with JJ, is like, I'm confident on his X's and O's abilities, but the lack of experiencing of coaching men, specifically the Lakers, specifically LeBron and AD, is like my biggest concern for him. So,
absolutely. I mean, that's an awesome question. And with this, here's the thing, like what I guess alluding to before, when you have a team with LeBron and AD playing, where they are now, LeBron's filling up the box score, AD is still, his prime. A team like that should win a bunch of games, no matter what, you know what I mean? Just like with that kind of talent level, we saw them win a title, with that, and they dragged the third best player on that team was KCP, probably Caruso. Or maybe Kuzma, whatever it was, but like, that typically you wouldn't think that kind of player would be the third best player on an NBA title team, bubble, whatever. So those guys generally, like, maybe they're not as dominating as they used to be, right? Maybe they don't have the effect that they used to have on the bottom line of winning like we thought they would. So suddenly it's not necessarily like what the coaching is doing. That said, you're right. The managing the egos and all that stuff is really important. It's even harder on the LeBron coach team for sure. And yes, experience becomes a really big factor with that and how you deal with that. Now, I suppose because JJ had all those years, have you guys watching Clipped, by the way? The show?
No.
I don't know why I'm watching it. I don't even know why they made it necessarily, but I'm watching it, and I'm assuming that there's probably a lot of stuff rooted in fact. And it's just put your head in that mindset. He went through the Doc Rivers, CP3, DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, Clippers. That is probably pretty good training for at least being exposed to the kind of things he's going to have to deal with, and hard-headedness, and and guys who are not nice to each other, all that stuff. So it's possible that he could have used that in his interview process. I'm sure he did, to tell him, I learned how to do that. Doc, showed me how to deal with that a little bit. Although it sounds like maybe him and Doc did not connect. Is that right? Am I making that up, or did I see something like that recently?
No, to my belief, he doesn't have the fondest relationship or opinion of Doc. I'm not sure if something like necessarily happened during his playing career, but they just didn't see eye to eye.
All right, and Clip is kind of, it's interesting, an interesting portrait of Doc as well, which we could talk about too if you want to. Because my take on how Doc coaches would not be the best way for a player like JJ to use. Like if he's going to say, "Oh, I played for Doc," playing for Phil. Even though Phil did get on players too, he definitely understood the optimal, like the notion of not having to just call out players all the time, not having to ride them and scream and yell at them, because he was a player who had dealt with some of that stuff when he was growing up. It looks to me like Doc is the old school version of all of that, where he'd use personal attacks in the practices and anger and just all those suboptimal things.
That's in the show.
That's in the show. Oh, you didn't see the clip?
Yeah. There's that clip in the practice where he's yelling at
everybody.
Yeah,
he yelled at Matt Barnes and said,
"That's why."
He was like, "That's why someone's sleeping with your wife." He was. He told CP3, "Check it up. You don't know how to check. That's why you don't got no ring like LeBron. You want to have a ring like your friend. That's why you don't got one." All types of crazy stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and listen, like if I was a writer, so when you go to like film school or whatever, I used to write screenplays. It's like you're trying to find drama and you're trying to heighten the drama, right? Even if it doesn't happen in real life, that's what you have to do. That's why it's a movie or a film or a TV show. So they could be, heightening all this stuff and making it up. That said, if we remember what happened with Ben Simmons when he was trying to come back with the Sixers, and he clearly was just not into it. He was struggling. He was off to the side. He wasn't really participating in the practice. And Doc saw this and said, well, I'm going to throw him in this drill. And I know, or if he didn't know, he should have known, he's probably going to kind of be half-hearted into it, not really warmed up, whatever it is, and not doing it hard. And so then that gave him the opportunity to detonate all over him and kick him out of practice and make this big show where what was the goal? Like what Doc didn't really like what was your goal? You knew that was going to happen. And so are you doing it just for yourself, for your ego, to like show everybody else, oh, I'm in charge here, whatever? Because anybody who understood even from a distance what was going on with Ben Simmons knew that if you're going to try to just shove him into a drill where he's not he's not really participating in the practice, and then like ride him and demand him, you got to go harder and harder, like that's going to end up bad, and that's not a good result no matter how you slice it. So knowing that kind of stuff was happening makes it pretty clear in my mind that whatever they're covering in the Eclipse show was probably closer to reality than not. And again, it's crazy because the coaches from that era, Doc's era, honestly not that much older than me. He's probably 10 years older than me. They learned a certain way, and man, it's hard to get them to evolve to something more optimal.